Welcome. It's your girl Renee Nicole. Welcome back to another episode of Name a Better Duo. I'm so excited about what I have for you today. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be rich. It's gonna be everything it's gonna be. Okay. So I'm excited to hop into this conversation. I'm just gonna wait for our guests to arrive. But in the meantime, in between time, thank you for joining us. I'm in hot, sunny Orlando, if it looks like I'm dressed in some summer wear, so it's a little hot over here. Hey, Maisha. Hey, good girl. Thank you for joining us. Hey there. Thank you, Lakeisha, for coming in. All right, our guest is here, so let's get started. Where you at, though? Where you at? Yo!
What's up?
Trey.
What's going on?
What's up with you? You gotta flip your situation.
I'm a
sideways.
little. Okay, my bad. Actually, hold on. I can do it like this,
Situation,
right?
so people can see your face.
Okay, yeah, nah.
There you go.
All right, cool.
Yes.
Cool. So what's going on? How are you?
What's up?
A lot of everything. A lot of everything. Yeah, this year has been starting off really well. Really well. It's been a blessing. So yeah.
Come on, blessing. I'm here for it. I was just welcoming everyone to another episode. This is our third in the second season, and where the Healing Resides series season or series rather. And I had to bring my cousin on here.
Yeah.
Clarence Miller III.
The third.
Media Strategist.
It's such a long name, right? To have all that, and it's like my middle name's not even in there, so.
But I mean, it's very important, you know. I love it.
It is very important.
It matches the personality, so I'm here for it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, very much so. So I had to have you on here to talk about this very important topic because it's something that a lot more of the world is seeing right now, social injustice. So we're going to be talking about healing from social injustice. What is the work that we can do to actually not succumb to it, not to become victim to it, but to actually heal from it and to actually change it, or at least try to improve it. And I'm like, who better than to have my cousin Trey on here to talk about this topic?
You know what? I've toned down a lot, so I think you'll get some better. I think you'll get some better answers than you probably would have maybe 5 or 6 years ago. So
ditto. Okay, ditto.
Exactly.
My perspective has changed because I used to be like this, and now I'm like, okay. Let me reflect. Let me see. What can I do?
Because it's wisdom. But I'll let you go ahead and do your thing, and then we'll get to that.
With age comes wisdom. Okay.
Exactly.
Well, I'm gonna let you take the floor. Introduce yourself first, and then we'll get started.
All right, everyone. My name is Clarence Miller III. I'm a digital communication strategist. I work with digital media, so podcast. So I do a lot of podcast strategy work. I do a lot of audio work. Script writing. I'm also have some other projects in the works that I'll be like letting people know later on.
And we said, we need to talk because some of the things we listen off.
Yes.
We need to have some conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's something very specific I want to talk to you about anyway. So yeah, this is just going to start the energy to get going and then, making it happen.
Yes.
But yeah, I went to Bowie State.
Hey, HBCU.
Right. I've been in Maryland my entire life. And my passions is what has me here today and being able to be constructive with it. Because at one time I wasn't necessarily constructive with my passions. But now I'm being a lot more, constructive with them. So helps you understand them.
Yeah, I love it. I'm here for it. Well, welcome. I'm excited to have you on Name a Better Duo.
Yes.
Yeah, I know this conversation is going to be really good, so we're not going to waste no time because I want to give you time to bless the people, okay? So we're talking about social injustice, and I feel like this is something that's not new.
Right,
This is
right, right,
something
right,
that we've known about and has existed since since we've known. However, I think a lot more people, outside of the Black culture, outside of just just a lot more people are being it's being brought to their attention,
right,
and
right,
they're
right,
being made aware of just how real it is and how much it still exists even today in
right.
2021.
Hmm.
So I wanted to dive into this topic, and first I want to ask you, where would you say social injustice originates from?
Um, the creation of this country. Well, even before that, I mean, I think that there was, you know, I mean, we can go back to the genesis of it, right? But I think, in America, it definitely starts with the policies that had been, enacted after or prior to slavery,
Yeah.
right? So, the black codes and all these rules, all these stipulations, and all of these burdens that the country put onto black people, especially black women, by having to carry that burden through generations, there's just been that ongoing struggle. But
Yeah.
there's a lot there. There's a lot of people, of course, in the past, but even right now, they're doing a lot of great work in the community
Yeah.
to make sure that they're not just their passions, but also other people's passions. Advocating for them and finding ways to connect bridges and I think right now it seems really wild, but I do think that there's a lot of great things happening. A
Yeah.
lot of great things happening.
That's good. And you mentioned slavery. You mentioned the conception of this country.
Hmm.
How would you say social injustice has changed from now, to say 200 years ago or so?
Um, I think historically we've been able to see different movements, right? And how people have played within those movements. I think now it's a little difficult I'm not gonna say difficult. It's a little different now with the internet.
Mm.
So I think we have a lot more exposure to things. We're able to get information right then and there. So I think with people being more aware now because of television, media, X, Y, and Z,
Yeah.
that's I think what has changed a lot of it. One of Dr. King's I'm not gonna say theories, but one of his methods was, we need to have the cameras there and get beat on so we can awaken the consciousness of the country,
Yeah.
right? So that was a strategy, and some may agree, not disagree. But those were the tactics back then that they had to use. Where now is that we can use social media campaigns and other things like that.
Yeah.
So just people using the platforms a lot more
Yeah.
wisely. Yeah,
That's good. It's the exposure, right? Because I feel like
yeah,
at one point in time, we're just discovering some of the things that happen,
exactly.
way, way, way back in the day before we had technology. So I think it's now that, someone can witness a police officer putting his knee on someone's neck and,
Right,
and
right,
videotape
right,
it
right,
so that the
right.
world can see this is what's going on. Where for a long time it was so hush hush,
Hmm.
and when it was hush hush, people were able to believe that things are better, and they were able
Right,
to believe that racism no longer exists and that we all are equal and all have the
right.
same opportunities, and that is still not the case.
And I think that's what makes it. I think that's what makes it kind of challenging, right, for the newer aged activists or people who are getting involved into the issues that's going on along in the nation, right? Um, I think that they all have their individual challenges. So yeah, although we have like social media now, we're able to spread the word quicker. We have a lot more voices. We have a lot more of information to kind of filter through, and I don't think we're a very media literate nation.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes that's what makes it challenging, right? And it kind of sometimes people in their actions devalue movements because of their misuse um of the movements at the time, right? When people are like, oh, it's because I'm black. It's like, nah, nigga, it's not because you're black. It's because you ain't shit, or you know what I mean? Like whatever, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, um, not necessarily ain't shit, but um,
I know what you're
right, right,
saying.
right, word. You know what I mean? So I think that that's a struggle that we have to kind of get through today and figure out what's real, what's fake. I mean, there's a new like conspiracy group pop up on TV all the time, right? Like at one time it was just a Tea Party. Now it's like QAnon and
Yeah.
bone this and that. And I'm like, hey, we
Yeah.
got too many microphones, cameras, keyboards because everyone's getting to it.
Yeah. That's good, man. Because everything, like Lakeisha's saying here, not everything that the social media is putting out there is
Mm,
accurate, you know?
right.
And so just because we do have access to more information doesn't necessarily mean that information is reality, and doesn't mean that it's being, it's not
Yeah.
accurately being, displayed.
And
Um,
and capitalism, real fast. Also, I think capitalism also has a major part in that as well because I mean, if you think about it, everybody's think piece comes out immediately and it has ads in it, and it's just so fast. And it's like, fam, you didn't even let that like thought marinate for real. I mean, in hip hop, they do a lot. It's like, oh, it's a classic album on that Friday, or it used to be Tuesday, right? But like on Fridays, it's like, oh, it's a classic album. It's like you gotta let that breathe for a little bit to see if it really is what you think it is.
that's
So,
it right there. That's it, because a lot of us are going to social media to
hmm
determine what we think, to
exactly.
determine our own belief system and our own opinions. It's like, nah, you have to formulate that yourself based
Right.
on the evidence, based on the information. But like you said, you got to let that marinate to
You
determine
got you
what
have
you
to.
believe. Because
Right.
we're getting our news from social media, number
Hmm.
one. So that's already issue number one. And then we're determining how we feel based on how that news outlet or that blog or whomever, that person that you
Exactly.
follow,
Exactly.
how they feel. And now all of a sudden,
Exactly.
now I feel that way too.
And that's where groupthink comes in, But to be clear, I think it is important for people to document these times, um, for people to be able to, find their inner wokeness, because I think everyone's wokeness happens at a different time in their lives, right? So while, you know, some people may experience it in their early 20s, some people may experience it in their early 30s because they're exposed to different things.
Yeah.
Um, and so uh, we have to start depending on our own thought and what we really think to ourselves, what our values are, because we're just, there's too many mini-me's walking around here.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I know I'm not on the questions
No.
yet.
Yeah, no, you good.
But I love that, it's what we're exposed to. Because I think about, we talked at the top of the show about, you going to an HBCU.
Hmm.
And I remember having conversations because we, grew up in a county
Of
where it's
course, right.
primarily white,
Republican.
and I remember talking to some of my friends who I went to school with who grew up in primarily black counties, or
Hmm.
like went to black school. All they knew was black. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And
Yeah.
their experience was different. You know what I mean? So
Hmm.
their response to racism wasn't the same as my response, because I recognized it differently,
Hmm.
being that I was used to being a minority
Hmm.
wherever I was. You
But
know?
that's interesting. It's interesting because I think back now, I didn't view, like, I feel like I didn't get my first taste of white people until after I left the county,
Hmm.
right? And that was when I was like 21, 22, like establishing myself, you know what I mean, on
Yeah.
my own. And but I felt like, at least in Edgewood, everybody kind of like was the same.
Yeah.
Not necessarily racial, but I just felt like, I don't know. I feel like there was just this, I knew it was there because of the other spaces in the world, but in the county itself, like I feel like I didn't really experience at that time white supremacy, right?
You went
I
to
probably
Edgewood, that's
wasn't.
why.
Exactly. See,
I went to
yeah,
Johnstown, it was
right, exactly,
different.
exactly. But see, that whole Route 40 corridor has all of us connected, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm. Y'all like, what's Edgewood, Johnstown? But
yeah, right, yeah,
it's different experiences, and I feel like, just to come back to our topic, I feel like, it does have a lot to do with what we're exposed to and what we
hmm
see, how we respond to racism. And you see, yeah, and we'll get more into this, but you see a lot of the people who are incarcerated, and the people that end up, in and out of the legal system, typically are, exposed to different things, and are from
absolutely,
certain environments where they're exposed to
right,
certain type of behaviors. And I feel like that's the thing that we need to get to the root of, and
hmm
try to heal. And we're talking about
right,
healing,
right.
so that we can actually see change. Now, with that, we're talking about racism, we're talking about discrimination. Um, do you think there is an end to racism? Is there anything that we can do to actually say racism is dead?
Um, so I'm like in the middle, right? So I'm optimistic in that yes, I think racism will end because we thought one day, slavery wouldn't end. Which I mean, in the terms of
Right. The
right
acts.
in the
Yeah.
American slavery, um, but that ended, right? So while there's still a lot of remnants from that, and we're still working through that as well. I do think we'll get to. We may not be able to see it in our lifetime,
Right.
right? But there will be that down the road. I do think that there will be a lot less barriers because of a lot of work people are doing, and also just because we're understanding things better.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. Because honestly, when I asked the question, I was like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know how I would
yeah,
respond to that question because it's like, it's gone on for so long. And it's something that's often taught,
hmm
and it's something that's taught, but it's also something that's embedded in a lot of souls.
right,
So
right,
it's
right.
like, what does that look like, And I
Yeah,
feel like that's going to take a lot of work. Like you said, I don't expect it to be in our lifetime.
yeah. I don't. I think one of the biggest threats I think to race and racism is technology. Um, And I do think, though, that, that's where I get skeptical about looking down the road, whereas though maybe we will have just a different fight. There'll be a different fight for racism because of maybe the lack of technology that certain, poor people or certain,
Yeah.
communities don't have access to these things. Um, so if they don't have access to them, then they're going to be left behind. And if you're left behind in this technology, like, you're not gonna probably get the job. I mean, everywhere you have to use a computer for everywhere, right? So not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily education, but just like technology and so I think that's a large threat, but I think it's up to us as medias, what I mean, to be able to um, kind of unveil these things in a
Yeah.
reasonable and also responsible manner, and not just being voices, right? So, and I think that's the way to heal is making sure that you put certain people in positions to be able to do certain things, to help to get to help get to the solution better,
Yeah.
right? Or not even faster, just just a more hitting the target more effectively and efficiently, and that's just working together and figure out what part you do play in this fight.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like, I feel like it's up to us, those who have the knowledge and those who
Mm-hmm.
have the resources to,
And the patience.
yeah, yeah, and exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And to take those resources and the technology and those things to
Right.
these neighborhoods where they don't have it. Because just look at all the kids right now who are
Mm-hmm.
struggling because they can't virtually learn because they don't have access to internet. They don't have
Yeah.
access to, So, man, that's a good, very good, very good point. What role do you think that
Mm-hmm.
we minorities play, in addressing racism, and what role do our Caucasian counterparts play in addressing it?
Um, I think we all play a major role. I'm not one of those people that believe that because you're part of a disenfranchised group, that disenfranchised group, like, that their word means everything. Meaning, let me clean it up. Let me clarify that because I want to make sure. I feel like Black people have just as much responsibility as anyone else in making sure that we make this into a greater good. You know what I mean? I know that sounds really idealistic, right? But I do think that it does take patience of having certain conversations that you don't want to have. It is going to take seeing that umpteenth million movie about slavery or whatever to be made so that someone is seeing it, right? And I think that, again, it goes back to being in that position, is where are you going to be to be able to help contribute to this? And so what side are you on? If you're on the side of actually completing this task, we all have to work together. And that means that I have to be patient, what I mean, with white people, with the powers to be, right? But I also have to be patient with my brothers and sisters as well, right? Because we get a little irritated, we get agitated, and then we have our own internal shit, our stuff, our own
Mm-hmm.
internal battles, right? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Like, I think, and that's a whole nother topic. The
right,
division
right,
that I
right,
feel like stems from slavery as well amongst Black people is what
hmm
sometimes hinders us. So if we
yeah.
can learn to unite and educate ourselves about how these issues are still plaguing us today.
But that brings up, I guess, another thought that I had. Like, the idea that we don't necessarily need to depend on other people to help fix certain things or to have them understand, right? We don't need to be over explaining ourselves to certain people. There's certain things that we are doing. I mean, just because it's cliche, but Jay-Z is showing, how this works, right? He's showing us that you get certain leverage, you get to a certain place and you're able to do certain things. And
Mm.
you're able to kind of, be that, not necessarily puppeteer, but you're able to kind of like mastermind those things. But you also do it within your own team, right? Making sure that your home is taken care of. Making sure that, the returning citizens from being incarcerated are actually getting the services that they need, the advocation that they need, right? I know a lot of
Yeah.
times people go, "Oh, that nigga was in jail," like it's, just throw them out the window. But it's like, no, we gotta pour into them. We have to pour into them.
Yeah.
So I think it's about us loving on one another more and better. But I just think, again, how cliche, Common would actually love this because his book, Love, he said love the entire time. He just kept saying love, 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 because love is love, love, and love is love. But anyways, but yes, but love is definitely going to push us forward. And love and patience.
Mm. That's good. Love and patience with each other, love and patience with others. I
Hmm.
think that's big. I feel like we are very responsible, for helping each other, because
Right,
like you
right.
said, a lot of time when we get into trouble or we get into circumstances, we kind of just like,
Yeah,
wipe our hands clean of those
yeah.
individuals, but they're the ones that need our love and patience the most. But I
Yeah.
do also think that there's a responsibility for Caucasians who
Oh,
have
absolutely, absolutely,
created this situation, whether it be them
absolutely.
or their
Yes.
ancestors,
Hmm.
to be responsible.
Right,
That's why I
right.
was very happy to see over the summer a lot of the protests were predominantly white, because I
Hmm.
feel like this is also your fight.
Right, right, right,
We
right,
we have proven to be in a situation where our voice isn't always heard, it's not always respected, but yours is.
right, right,
So
right,
just like you
right.
would stand up for your brother who's been incarcerated because
Hmm.
you might have a little more wiggle room in certain
Hmm.
rooms, they need to do that as well.
I mean,
So
and another thing is also education, right? I have a line brother who is doing amazing work, and in the community, the LGBTQ. I'm going to leave the Q because I don't know what the rest, respectfully, right?
that's
But
cool.
he's doing a lot of work, and through him and I's conversations, like I learned a lot more.
Yeah.
Um, I learn a lot more by just understanding nuances, and there's going to be some things that I don't understand, and being mature enough to be okay with not necessarily understanding, but still, you know, um, still being like, I hesitate to use the word ally because I know there's actually like a real meaning for that in when it comes to being the advocate, but for the lack of better words, like being a better ally by just listening and becoming a little bit more educated. Um,
Yeah.
that also comes with the patience and the love, right? Is just
Mhm.
being around different people. I mean, there's people who have different views or whatever, and sometimes it just takes just listening. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't have to agree. You don't even have to say anything. Just taking time to, um, that's the love, right? It's just
That's
like taking
love.
the time to learn. You know what I mean? And I think sometimes it's gonna happen where the white people are gonna get like some lip, just like black men get. I don't say lip, but what I mean is like, yeah, that was the wrong term. But like, what I mean, education, right?
Yeah.
There's times that like white people are just gonna have to like kind of take those bumps and bruises, just like when it comes down to with black men and black women. Black men, we have to take those bumps and bruises because there's another story being explored and detailed, and yeah. So educating ourselves and wanting to be educated, I think those
Yeah.
those things are going to help us it's going to get through.
Education is key. So we're going to switch gears here a little bit and talk about some of the oppression that women suffer. And
Hmm.
right now, especially women, specifically black women, are
Hmm.
disproportionately dealing with unemployment. They're the ones that are, suffering from low pay wages. What do you think the reason is for this, and how can it be counteracted?
Um. Well, those things specifically like economic issues. So I think a lot of the times when there's an economic issue in the country, the people who are the least fortunate also always feel it the worst, right?
Yeah.
Some people would argue that, that after when September 11th happened and when all the infrastructure fell and everyone was just on pause, that black men were affected the most because they had the blue collar jobs,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's a lot of variables into different things, but I do think that economically, and this is not like a nationalist, what is a nationalist kind of like principle, but I do think that um, us individually finding our own streams and us um,
Mm.
building with one another. Again, I know a lot of this does sound cliche, but I do think a lot of those things do help, right? Because it comes
Yeah.
down to the idea of like teamwork, and being able to sustain, yourself. You're always going to need help. I'm not saying we have to, say, buck the system completely. Um, but there's so much on that. So much on that. It's so
Yeah.
much on that thought.
No, I love that point. I feel like ownership is so important, and it's something
Hmm.
that we have to learn. Financial freedom,
Hmm.
financial education is something that we,
Right.
as Black people, really need to
Hmm.
improve on. And
Well, I
I
think
think
honestly,
that,
I think it's everybody, right?
yeah,
I think it's everybody. I think it's because once we work on small collective economies, the entire economy does better, right? So, I think that once the government makes way for certain policies to be put into place so that people do have access to jobs, right? We shouldn't be saying, oh, no, my personal opinion, we shouldn't say, no, you can't be in the military because, you're transgender. Like, how are you going to take
right,
some food? That person not only wants to fight for your country, right?
right,
That they've been, shattered on. Um,
yeah,
but then like also like that's a money opportunity. That's a job right there. That's someone who's investing into their career 20 years down the road. Like let's make less barriers to doing those
mm,
things. And so that kind of goes back to your earlier question of like, the different ways of how we kind of we do movements is it's important for people to be on the backs of government, right? Just as it's important for people to be in the community doing their thing. Like all these pieces have to work together to be able to
mm,
change these things. So I think black women being disproportionately affected by these things, comes down to, of course, policies, um,
mm,
and being putting ourselves in positions to be able to make sure that women have the platform to be able. Well, y'all have the platform to do what y'all do, and y'all have been. But there's still more work for us to do collectively. So I think that it goes back to the education piece. Black men have to listen to black women. They have to take time to be vulnerable, right? Um, and share stories.
yeah. That's what I was going to ask next. What do
Mm.
you think is the role of Black men in breaking down some of these barriers for Black women?
Sometimes and sometimes it's difficult for me, but just shutting up, right? Just like
Mm,
not talking, um, and truly actually listening, not just like hearing, but like actually listening. Um, I think it comes down to us as black men opening up a little bit more, being a
yeah,
little more vulnerable. I think, if you have two defensive boxers fighting the entire time, it's going to be a really boring fight, right?
yeah,
So I think that for that black men, like I said, I think we need to, but I think that maybe it's going to be more of communication with each other. Um, of course, accountability of each other, making sure that we are working to the capacity that we are taking on, right? So if we're saying that
mm,
we're a man, that we make mistakes and just being like, yo, I messed up, I fucked up, and so
right,
I'm sorry, and let's figure out a way how to not do this. There's used to be times where I used to like apologize with pride in my chest still, right? Um, and it took some time for me to kind of realize how to kind of separate those two things. So this is some emotional growing that black men have to do, to
mm-hmm.
be able to support, black women. Yeah.
Yeah, communication is key. I
Yeah.
feel like that's where we're lacking. Like you said, I feel like men and women of all races lack in that area
Hmm.
because we think differently, just
Right.
naturally. But if we can communicate in a way that's where we both feel safe, and
Hmm.
where we're both able to be vulnerable,
Hmm.
um, I think that would make such a major difference because I think a
Yeah.
lot of the time men just don't understand the
Hmm.
obstacles that we face.
Hmm.
Um,
And I think also, it's to the contrary as well, right? It's flipped. I think that there's a
yeah,
lot of miseducation of each other, and there's a lot of
yes,
misunderstanding of each other. I think there's a lot of frustration and rage and anger that allows us to miss what each other are saying.
Yes.
And so I think that I think everyone needs to, heal in some perspective, right? Some
Yeah.
aspect. And also I think healing is like an ongoing process, right? It's not like this, like, I don't think there's this destination
Yeah.
that we get to. It's like, was a manifest destiny, right? I don't think, well, no, that's not it. Manifest destiny is something different, my bad. But yeah, so getting to the end goal, getting to the finish line, that takes time. It's a marathon, right? And
Yeah.
so so we have to take the time and energy to figure it out.
Yeah. No, like you said, there's a lot of miseducation or a lot of there's just a lot of our unspoken tension. I
Hmm.
feel like
Yeah,
between men and
yeah.
women, period. So,
Or I actually I think it's spoken, right? I
hmm
think it's being misinterpreted or misunderstood on both ends, right? Because I think I think women are being a lot more clear, right? But I think men are being clear as well. But I think there's a lot undertone also with us. And I think right now, we're seeing, a renaissance.
and I think that's the same issue that we see with racial
Hmm.
trauma is the fact that things are being misinterpreted.
Exactly, exactly.
Because your experience is different than mine,
Right.
but it doesn't make your
Yeah.
experience any less worthy.
Invalid. Right, right, right.
Or less valid, exactly. So
Yeah,
I feel like that's the reason why. But if we can actually learn to communicate, and that's a skill, that's a
it is.
learned skill, and sometimes it can be very difficult to learn, to actually be able to interpret or to articulate rather
Right.
what I'm experiencing in a manner
Hmm.
that you're going to understand, being
Yeah.
that your mind works totally different
But these
from mine.
but these things are like ever growing, like they're ever change, they're always changing, right? There's always more sides and nuances to them, so we have
Yeah.
to be malleable in the sense of being able to be just flexible and be able to understand different places, like different stories. So we have to be, flexible to do that.
Yeah, yeah. So back to economics. What do
Hmm.
you think? How do you think racial capitalism is used to keep people of color in poverty?
Well, sure, I think capitalism in general keeps people in poverty, but specifically for Black people, again, it's a lot of the policies. It's a lot of the lack of access to things. Um, I don't know how many schools get shut down in white communities like they do maybe in inner cities for black and brown students.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but I think ec- economically, see, there's so many principles and there's so many different like opinions on these things. It's kind of difficult to pinpoint what needs to be done or
hmm
what could be done. But I do think that a lot of the basic things of just policies, advocating for different policies, again, making sure people are getting back to work, making sure people have access to getting to those jobs, that when they are on those jobs, that they do have the adequate like care. Um,
hmm
I don't know what it's like to be at a job and not have health care, right? I don't know
Right.
what that's like, but there's people who probably have to like pay a lot out of pocket. There's a lot of different nuances to that. And so if it become economically, economics has always been an issue in this country, right? I
Yeah.
mean, especially in the 70s, 60s and 70s, that's where we saw where though people not just only were talking about with Dr. King and Fred Hampton, they start talking about poverty across the board and capitalism as being an issue. Yes, race is also impacted by that, right? And that's what makes the nuances in them. But capitalism in this country itself is what crushes people, and that's going to be a difficult task, I think, because again, it is really nuanced. When you have this idea of the American dream of you have like this free will. There's this
hmm
idea of like the strongest survives, but there's also a lot of barriers for a lot of people, and so we have to be honest about those barriers and making sure that we are finding ways to address them multi or 40.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. We touched on mass incarceration, and
Hmm.
the mass incarceration of Black people is often referred to as modern day slavery.
Hmm.
And we're, like we talked about before, we're seeing police officers murder
Hmm.
Black and brown people, and just there's no punishment.
Right.
How can we protect our children from becoming victim to these attacks against us?
I think we can do the best as possible, but I don't think that, we can't always be with them, right? So, with my baby, right? He's not even 2 yet, but I do fear that I teach him certain tactics to try to stay as safe as possible, right?
Yeah.
But I also want him to know that sometimes those tactics won't work, right? There's just sometimes, like
Mm-hmm.
people say, oh, well, um, if he wasn't resisting arrest, we wouldn't have to beat his ass. It's like, nah, he wouldn't have got his ass beat if he didn't beat his ass, right? Like it's not because of always their actions.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to be honest about that and transparent with that as well, because it's not always us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that reasons why things happen to us or the places we
Right.
were, just because that person's being an ass.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sorry. Can you repeat your question one more time again?
How
Because
do
I feel like
you,
there's
well,
a
just
second part to it.
on that topic though, how do you keep from going insane? Do you know what I mean? Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
teach your black son, or how do you, as a black
Mm-hmm.
man, knowing that, like, I can sometimes do everything that I'm told to do, I can do all the right things
Mm-hmm.
and still end up in a bad situation? How do you keep your a good mental frame of mind there?
Mm, I don't know. Maybe it's just like a PTSD thing that became like a scar, right? And it's just like there, like it's this muscle memory. Because I mean, if you actively think about it, yeah, I mean, you would probably like go nuts. But I think it's just one of those things where you kind of, our parents kind of teach us over the years
Yeah.
and feed us certain knowledges to be able to prepare us to be able to kind of try and get through a
Yeah.
lot of the BS, especially like, at work or in other, social settings, being able to, I mean, deal with those things. Um, it's difficult, right? Also because what my dad experienced and what my grandfather experienced is something completely different than what I experienced,
Yeah.
and trying to be able to like connect those dots and show that there's a common theme, to be able to teach not only just my son, but also teach other people, or other youngins, about these
Yeah.
things. And because I don't like preaching, right?
Yeah.
I don't like preaching at people, and I think that there's just ways to find unique ways to be able to address these issues.
Mhm.
Whereas though maybe they're not so daunting when we're trying to get around them.
Yeah, because that's my concern, especially with younger generations. It's like, you would think that because you see it so much more now because of
Mm,
social media that you take it a little more seriously, but I feel like a lot of younger generations don't take it seriously until it hits home, you
right,
know?
right.
And so that's one of the things that I'm most
I think
concerned
honestly that's with
about.
most issues.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's why so many people can say, racism doesn't exist because it doesn't affect them. So
exactly.
I feel like
Or at
with
least they don't think it does.
exactly, exactly. They don't see the impact. And
Hmm.
so, I just think it's so important for us to, like you said, we don't have to preach, we don't
Hmm.
have to put fear,
Hmm.
in anyone, but just to be aware and to be alert, and to
Yeah.
be conscious of your surroundings and who you're around, because
Hmm.
unfortunately we we don't have the same liberties as other
Exactly.
people. So we
Exactly.
just have to take
Exactly.
that into consideration. And I don't think it has to
Yeah.
be a whole fear tactic thing. It
Hmm.
just has to be an honest thing, And like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
said, your experiences aren't going to be the same as your son's, and
Exactly.
yours aren't the same as your father's and your grandfather's. It's totally different, but
Hmm.
we can take what we've learned and try to at least educate
Yes.
and alert.
Yeah. It's kind of like remixing the song, right? Or
Yeah.
sampling the message for
Mhm.
the new record or whatever. And I think that that's where a lot of the um, this is where a lot of people's creativity could really work. I think there's a lot of people who want to be able to contribute and help, but they don't know how.
Mm.
And I think that's also a thing that stifles us, right? Is not knowing where to help.
Mm.
I think there's a lot of people who have a lot of passion to help. They just don't know how.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Mm.
That's good. That's good. So, with all that said,
Hmm.
what actions would you like to see Black people, specifically of our generation, like millennial age, what action should we be taking to actually make an impact and try to enhance the future generations?
I think we have to make sure that we're part of the top tier of the millennials, right? We're towards the older millennials, right? So I think it's important for us to make sure that we're loving on the younger ones, or the next generation behind us, to make sure that they feel supported and they don't feel disconnected. Because like a lot of people, they're like, "Yo, old niggas be hating, old niggas this, old niggas that."
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
right, yeah, well, they do be hating. Old niggas, we definitely be hating. But there's definitely this gap, and so I think it's important for us to make sure that that gap is not so large.
Yeah.
I think us as people, this generation specifically, the millennials, we are like the glue to a lot of these things. Like we are a major transition period between
Ooh,
completely two different worlds. And so I do think it's our responsibility to make sure that we are making sure that the ones behind us have the tools that they need to be able to succeed. And that's, again, loving on us.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
That's good. I love that. We are the glue. Like us,
Yeah.
30-somethings,
Yeah.
I'll throw that out there. I feel like we
Mm-hmm.
kind of have the best of both
Don't be trying to
worlds.
get age.
I said 30-something.
Right. Somewhere. Yeah.
But we know a life before technology. We kind of we've heard the stories of our parents. We're a little bit closer to that generation of desegregation and things like that. But then we also are we did grow up with some technology, and we did see some of the we're seeing the changes, and we're more abreast than our parents are.
Yeah.
So I think that like us being the glue is so important, because like you said, like my brother's 24, so he's always saying, "Oh, we're young and having fun. Like this is just," and I'm like, "No, but it doesn't matter. Changes. You're a black man, But I think us not, like you said, not preaching to them, because I know what that feels like. I remember being younger and feeling like, old people just hate us, and I don't want to be that older when I get older. I don't want to be that person like, I can't stand these kids. They just don't care about nothing. Like, like I don't want to become that person, but I want to be able to have healthy communication with them and help them realize, like, look, you got to take this seriously, because there are certain attacks that are just innately going to be thrown at you because of the color of your skin. So take that seriously and educate yourself, so that you can at least have that education as a barrier against that type of discrimination.
Yeah, and that alludes to like a larger point of sometimes knowing when to disconnect, right? Remember healing, right? So if we want to heal, we kind of have to disconnect from a lot of the unplug from a lot of the confusion, a lot of the mayhem. And so you can kind of, refuel yourself and understand yourself better. Because sometimes you don't learn things about yourself when you're in the mix. You have to come out of the mix, kind of learn it, right? So, yeah. I think that's why Walden by Thoreau is one of my favorite books, right? So my favorite. Walden by Thoreau. He was a writer, but he was also like a theorist and stuff. I won't say philosopher, but theorist. And he had to move. He moved away into the woods. And he isolated himself to be able to write his thoughts, because he felt like he couldn't philosophize like in the world.
Oh, well, Walden by Thoreau.
Yeah,
I've never heard that one, but I'm gonna look it up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna look it up. That's good. This has been so good, Trey. Thank you so much for this conversation. This was very fun, and I feel like we could go on and on, because there's so many topics as it pertains to social injustice. But I feel like we are ready, just from some of the tools you provided, to do some of the groundwork, to educate ourselves and learn more about how we can actually make impact. I don't want to talk about it and not actually have action points, and not actually, hit the ground and try to see change. I don't want our grandkids to be talking about the same topics that we're talking about.
And I think the way we can do that is again by like showing people to put their talents into a movement, right? So if you like to do parties or organizations, you could probably work with someone to do that, right? You can lend your time to a nonprofit and pour into that nonprofit by giving back, right?
Yeah.
Everyone doesn't have to be on the front lines. Everyone doesn't have to be um in the boardrooms. Everyone doesn't have to be
Yeah.
in the surgery, in the surgeons, in the operating room. Everyone doesn't have to be in these special places to make all these major changes. It's the small things. It's
Yeah.
helping this nonprofit get their accounting things together, right? It's helping them set up
Mm.
small things so that they can um uh you know help effect change in their space. You don't necessarily have
Yeah.
to be you know a part of that space, but you're contributing to. And I guarantee you, a lot of these small businesses and nonprofits that are being worked by people who are doing multiple other things, if not always also having children, and families and personal lives, and still trying to do that fight. That's how people can give back. And I think that once we start seeing that in other people, we'll start having more confidence in other people, because it's like, yo, you may not completely understand, but you kind of understand because you're close over here doing something for me. And I think
Yeah.
that's the way of kind of like building the bridges, is finding
That's
ways how to
it.
contribute. Yeah,
Yeah, that's good because that's what so many I feel like people are get overwhelmed by. It's like I don't know how I can contribute. I got
exactly.
family back home, or I just don't have
And so people
time.
do nothing. And
You
so they do
know
nothing at all. Right, right, right.
exactly, but you excel in accounting, help with their books, or
Hmm.
things like that's good.
Exactly.
That's
Yep.
a good point. I
It's the
love that.
small things, Joe. And again, like it's the small things that can help us really put this puzzle together. I think that
Yeah,
there's always gonna be pieces falling off the puzzle. The paint's gonna always be something's always gonna be breaking the ceiling or whatever. But having the confidence to be able to go, yo, I know somebody who can help me get this, the spackle to be able to fix this, or I know someone who can help me cut the wood to do X, Y, and Z, or I know how to do that myself, right? Just being prepared to be able to contribute to the infrastructure being, damaged by some sort.
yeah. That's it. That's it. I love it. We're gonna play this game before
Mm,
I let you go. It's
okay.
called the this or that game, and I'm just gonna give you two scenarios or two
Hmm.
topics, two options, and you let me know which one is better to
I'm
you.
too indecisive for this game, by the way.
Well, that's good. Tell me why for both,
Okay. All right.
okay?
Cool. 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 Bet.
We can do that too, okay?
All
All
right.
right. So the first one, along with our topic of social injustice,
Hmm.
organized protest or writing to our city and state officials when it comes to like issues we see that are negatively impacting our communities. Should we protest or write to our officials?
I think they're equally both important. Like I was saying earlier, I
Why?
think that there's multiple ways, right? So there's multiple ways to practice democracy.
Mm-hmm.
Voting is one. Protesting is one. Writing to your local politicians is one. Um, Doing things to be able to aid people being stronger participants in the democratic process. So I think that they're both equally just as important. Um, do I enjoy seeing looting? Excuse me. Do I enjoy seeing things being burned down and being stolen? No, I don't. However, that's a part of the thing, right? Right. And so that's people are communicating a bigger issue.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe we should listen to them, more. So I think that to answer your question, I think that they're both equally just as important.
That's good. That's good. Okay, next one. Addressing the big issues or starting small?
You specifically with social justice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both. I think it's both good
Okay.
because I think simultaneously we can have multiple things working, right? That's how assembly gets done so quickly. That's why we have all these cars on the road. We have a line of things to do. So someone's working on probably a bigger, more technical process, but there's someone else working on the little small kinks as well. We need
Yeah.
everybody. We need everybody here to doing something. So I think that while we do have people who are the strategists, you know, um, in the Oval Offices or strategists, in those war rooms, right, are just as important as the young person who wants to hold a sign, not hold a sign, but who wants to be outside, expressing. I didn't want to reduce it just holding a sign, but that wants to be out there actually, showing physically that they are
Yeah.
pushing back on the movement. I think that visually is good. I think because we need to see those things, right? It's important for us to see those things. But also behind the scenes. I mean, where we don't always see things happening, but it's making it work. It's kind of like how we're growing up. As an adult, it's like, damn, like I don't even know how my parents kept things together, right? But they were doing it in the back, working, making it happen so that we could be able to have whatever we needed, right? So I think that, those things, sometimes the encouragement of seeing someone, being there right in front of you and seeing the passion versus, behind the scenes and getting it done as well.
I love that. I love that analogy too. Okay. This is nothing to do with social injustice, but to keep it fun.
Okay. Right.
Biggie or Pac?
Now this one I'm not going to be indecisive on, and that's Biggie.
Why? Okay. Why?
I picked Big because Big was raw. He had raw talent. There wasn't, he didn't go to any special schools that I know of, to sharpen these crafts. He didn't, he didn't have, this wasn't Goodwill Hunting, right? He didn't have some mentors saying, oh yeah, this is exactly how you do it. I mean, he was creative in making these things happen, and he was one of the great. I think Nas is the greatest, but Biggie, and some people, one of the biggest rappers ever, and he did that before he was 25. I think he was like 23, right? So to be such a young kid and to have that much impact, I gotta give it to Big. I got to.
And you got people agreeing with you in the comments.
See? And that's definitely not the East Coast thing because Pac was in Baltimore, so.
Right, exactly. He likes to act like he's from the West Coast, but he's straight from
Right. He's over here. Yeah.
Yes, and Nas is indeed Nas is the GOAT. Thank you, Kareem. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I agree on that.
But okay, so let's flip it to you for the Big and Pac one.
I'm a Jay-Z fan. Jay-Z was my favorite rapper.
Okay.
Yeah, he was my favorite rapper. But I would say, man, I've gone back and forth about this. I grew up loving Biggie. I think it was more of the East Coast like vibe that I'm used to. However, as I got older, I was able to appreciate Pac more and just what, a lot of things we talked about. But I think I'm just always going to be a Biggie chick. Like, I feel like it's always going to be Biggie for me, too, because I feel like he was consistent, and who he was. And just hearing the point that you made was good. Like, I feel like Tupac, I don't want to compare him to her at all.
Right.
But him, and like, I'm thinking of when you talk about the schooling and all that, I'm comparing him to Nicki Minaj because they both went to, like, art schools, and they both are performers.
Exactly.
And I feel like they are entertainers.
Exactly.
Whereas Biggie spoke from the heart. He spoke from experience. He raw, like you said.
And again, that's not to take anything away from, Pac and his passions. I think that, life was always fair to him. And so that made him probably some bitter and maybe paranoid in certain spaces, and maybe his behavior towards other people wasn't always, loved and appreciated, but like you're right, there was we saw growth because I think Pac was definitely older than Big when he passed, but we saw Pac a lot longer in multiple different spaces, right? We saw him acting, we saw him, rapping, we saw him, being in a lot of different spaces. So we always have to give it to Pac. We always have to give it up for him and what he has contributed, not just to this culture, but just, to hip hop culture, but also just to Black people. Like he's still being quoted, to this day, 20 some years later, right?
He's probably still dropping albums to this day.
Exactly. In that too.
His work ethic.
Big's body of work, because it's so condensed, I think also it's a little more consumable, palatable for me because you have so many records. It's like, I don't even know where to start. Now, of course, he has like classic albums, during classic times. But I just feel like Big is just, it's like 2 albums. Well, Ready to Die, not Ready to Die, but Life After Death is 2 discs. But but those 2 albums have solidified him forever. Like that's phenomenal.
That's legit. That's like makes me think of like Lauryn Hill, Miseducation. Like one album to me.
One album, yeah, and they're
top 5 to me. Top 5 albums, and you only drop one. Like
exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
we're gonna have to have a whole nother live
about
hip hop.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
But no, thank you so much, Clarence
Mm-hmm.
Miller III, for joining me
Absolutely.
today on
Yes,
Name a
yes.
Better Duo. This was such a great conversation, and I would love to keep
Mm-hmm.
it going. Those who
Yeah,
are watching, please go back and watch again. Get some of those
yeah.
gems, share with a friend. Let people know where they can find you.
So, you can find me at, I think I gotta change it. It is complex. It is underscore complex,
Yeah.
I believe. And stay tuned for some other things happening, and I'll be making announcements for them, and you'll see other pages and stuff. But I'll be talking to you more specifically. But for the peoples in the internets, we'll see. Just stay tuned.
I love it. I'm excited to
Yeah,
see it. Thank you
yeah, yeah.
again. And thank you everyone for tuning in to Name a Better
Yes,
Duo.
thank you, thank
We
you.
will be continuing this series next week for another episode of Where the Healing Resides. But in the meantime, in between time, go back and get this good info one more time. Thank you again to my guests. I
Yeah, thank
appreciate
you.
you. And
Of
we'll be
course, of
talking again
course.
soon.
Yep, we'll be
All
rapping soon.
right.
All
Have a
right,
good
love.
weekend.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Bye, everybody.